My name is Claire Whitman, and I was 32 years old the night my family asked me to hand over my grandfather's inheritance like it was loose change from the bottom of my purse. $75,000. That was the number printed in black ink on the copy of Grandpa Walter's will. Not divided between the grandchildren, not placed in some family account, not left for my parents to manage. It said my name clearly. Claire Ann Whitman. For most people, that amount of money would mean breathing room, a down payment, debt paid off, a chance to stop checking the price of everything before putting it in the grocery cart. For me, it meant something quieter. It meant my grandfather had seen me. That was why I should have known my family would come for it. The demand came 3 days after his funeral, in my parents' dining room in Cincinnati, under the same chandelier my mother only turned on when she wanted guests to believe we were warmer than we were. The casseroles from church ladies were still stacked in the refrigerator. Sympathy cards lined the mantel. Grandpa's framed photo sat on the sideboard, his silver hair combed neatly, his blue eyes caught forever in that half-amused look he had when someone was lying badly and thought he had not noticed. My mother, Linda, had asked me to stay after everyone left. "We just need to talk as a family," she said. In my family, that sentence never meant talking. It meant I was about to be assigned a responsibility nobody else wanted to carry. I sat at the dining room table with my coat still on. My father, Gary, stood by the window with his arms crossed. My brother Brandon sat across from me, his eyes red, his tie loosened, a tissue twisted between both hands like a prop he had practiced with. My Aunt Paula and Uncle Martin lingered near the kitchen doorway, pretending they were not part of it while making sure they did not miss a word. My mother placed a folder in front of me, not gently. Inside were printed invoices, attorney estimates, credit card statements, and a handwritten total circled twice in blue pen. $72.80. I looked at the number, then at Brandon. "What is this?" My mother folded her hands. "That is what your brother needs to get through the divorce." I waited for the rest of the sentence, the part where she explained why it was sitting in front of me. It did not come. Brandon cleared his throat. "Megan's trying to destroy me," he said. "She wants the house, the kids, everything. If I don't get a better attorney, I'm done." I looked at the folder again. Some of the charges were legal fees, some were not. There were credit card balances, late penalties, a personal loan, a hotel charge circled poorly enough that someone had tried to hide it with a highlighter. I had worked as a paralegal for 9 years. I knew the difference between a legal emergency and a man trying to make his consequences look like a family crisis. "I'm sorry you're going through that," I said. "But what does this have to do with me?" My mother's face changed, just slightly. The soft, grieving mother disappeared, and the woman who had raised me to confuse obedience with love looked back from across the table. "Claire," she said, "your brother needs that inheritance more than you do." There it was, not a question, not a request, a verdict. I leaned back in my chair. "No." Brandon's head snapped up. My father pushed away from the window. "Don't start." "I'm not starting anything," I said. "Grandpa left that money to me." My mother gave a small laugh, the kind she used when she wanted witnesses to hear how unreasonable I was being. "Your grandfather was old, sweetheart. He didn't understand how bad things had gotten for Brandon." That was the first lie. Not the biggest one, not the ugliest, but the first one spoken out loud that night. Grandpa Walter had understood everything. He understood more from a nursing home chair than my parents understood standing in the middle of their own lives. He understood who visited when nobody was watching. He understood who asked for money and who brought groceries. He understood who called him lonely and who called him only when a bill was due. 2 weeks before he died, I had sat beside his bed while rain tapped against the window of his room at Maple Creek Assisted Living. His hands were thin by then, the veins raised like blue thread under paper skin, but his grip on mine was still firm. "They'll come for what I left you," he said. I told him not to talk like that. He ignored me because Grandpa had never wasted time comforting people with lies. "When they do," he said, "don't fight them with anger." I tried to smile. What should I fight them with? His eyes moved toward the old television mounted on the wall. "Let the video play." I thought he was confused. That was before I knew he had prepared for this family better than I ever had. Back in my parents' dining room, Brandon pressed the tissue against his face. "You have no idea what I'm about to lose," he said. I looked at my brother, 36 years old, 2 children he posted about more than he parented, a wife he had betrayed and then blamed for leaving, a man who had spent his whole life setting fires and calling himself abandoned when the smoke reached him. "You made choices, Brandon." His face hardened. "That's easy for you to say. You always land on your feet." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because it was exactly the kind of sentence people say when they have mistaken your survival for luck. "I landed on my feet because nobody was coming to catch me," I said. The room went quiet. My mother stood then, one hand pressed to her chest as if I had physically struck her. "This is your brother," she whispered. "Your blood. You don't get to keep $75,000 while his life is falling apart." My father added, "Family doesn't keep score." That was rich, coming from a man who remembered every dollar Brandon had supposedly needed, but forgot every birthday of mine that did not come with a problem to solve. I looked at the folder again, then at Grandpa's photo on the sideboard. His eyes seemed almost alive in the frame, watching, waiting. My mother followed my gaze and her voice sharpened. "Your grandfather would have wanted you to help him." That was the second lie, and it was the one that made something inside me go still. Not angry, colder than angry, useful, because I knew what Grandpa had wanted. I knew what he had said in that quiet room while rain slid down the glass. I knew he had left something behind, something my family was afraid of, even if they did not know exactly what it contained. So I did not shout, I did not cry, I did not accuse anyone of anything. I closed the folder and slid it back across the table. "No," I said again. Brandon stared at me like the word belonged to a language he had never been forced to learn. My mother's mouth tightened. "You are making a terrible mistake." Maybe, but it would be my mistake. Not Brandon's bill, not my mother's guilt, not my father's command dressed up as family loyalty. Mine. I stood and picked up my purse. My father stepped toward the doorway, not blocking me exactly, just reminding me that men in our family had always believed their bodies could become walls when their words failed. "You walk out with that money," he said, "and don't expect this family to forget it." I looked at him. For 32 years, I had been afraid of being pushed out of that family. That night, for the first time, I wondered if being pushed out was just another word for being set free. "I'm not asking you to forget," I said. "I'm asking you to remember this conversation clearly." Then I left. By the time I reached my car, my phone was already buzzing. Mom, Dad, Brandon, Aunt Paula. One message after another, lighting up the dark like small alarms. Selfish, cold, ungrateful. Grandpa would be ashamed. I sat behind the wheel and opened a new folder on my phone. Whitman Inheritance. Then I saved every message. People who rewrite history always count on emotions getting messy. They count on guilt, on grief, on everyone being too embarrassed to ask for proof. But I work in law. I keep records for a living. And what my family did not know was that Grandpa Walter had kept records too. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where quiet people finally stop paying for the damage they did not cause. If you have ever been called selfish for protecting what someone else wanted to take, this story is for you. Because my family thought the inheritance was $75,000. They were wrong. The real inheritance was the truth. And when Grandpa's video finally played, nobody at that table was ready for what he had left behind. I did not drive back to Columbus right away. I sat in my car outside my parents' house with the engine off and my hands still on the steering wheel, listening to my phone vibrate in the cup holder. The screen kept lighting up with names that had spent years teaching me that love was measured by how much I was willing to give up. Mom, Dad, Brandon, Aunt Paula. Then Mom again. The house behind me glowed warm through the dining room windows, that fake golden light my mother loved so much. From the outside, it looked like a family gathered after a funeral, grieving together, leaning on each other. That was always the thing about my family. From the street, we looked decent. Inside, they had just tried to turn my grandfather's death into Brandon's payment plan. I picked up the phone when my mother called for the 4th time. "Claire," she said, breathless, as if I were the one who had caused a medical emergency. "Come back inside." No, a pause. You do not get to walk out after speaking to your father that way. There it was. Not the inheritance, not Brandon's divorce, not Grandpa. My tone, my disobedience. The real crime in our family had never been cruelty. It had always been refusing to accept it politely. I didn't raise my voice, I said. You humiliated us. I said no in a room where everyone expected yes. That is not humiliation. My mother inhaled sharply. I could picture her standing in the kitchen with one hand pressed to the counter, Aunt Paula hovering nearby, Brandon pretending to be too devastated to listen while hearing every word. Your brother is drowning, she said. Then maybe he should stop drilling holes in his own boat. Don't be ugly. I looked through the windshield at Grandpa's old maple tree in the front yard. He had planted it when my mother was little. Every fall, he used to rake the leaves into piles for Brandon and me. Brandon would destroy the piles, laughing. I would rebuild them. Even then, that was our arrangement. He made the mess. I cleaned it up. Everyone called him spirited and me difficult. Mom, I said, I am not giving Brandon my inheritance. Your inheritance? Her voice changed around the word, as if it tasted spoiled. Listen to yourself. Your grandfather is barely in the ground, and you're already talking like some greedy stranger. I closed my eyes. 3 days. That was all they had waited. 3 days after watching me stand beside Grandpa's casket with my hand on the wood because I could not bear to let them lower him without one last touch. 3 days after my mother had leaned against me at the graveside and cried into my coat. 3 days after Brandon had arrived late to the service and left early because, according to him, grief made him sick. 3 days and they had a folder ready, not a conversation. A folder. I'm going home, I said. If you leave now, my mother said, you are choosing money over family. No, I said quietly. I am choosing not to confuse the two anymore. I hung up before she could answer. For a few seconds, I just sat there breathing, not crying. I had done enough of that at the funeral, quietly in the church bathroom where no one could turn my grief into evidence against me. What I felt now was not grief. It was the old pressure in my chest, the one I had grown up with. The feeling of standing in a room where everyone had already agreed on who you were before you opened your mouth. Selfish, cold, difficult, ungrateful. Those words had followed me out of that house when I was 18 with 2 suitcases, a used laptop, and a college scholarship that covered tuition, but not food. I had built my life around proving I could survive without needing them, and somehow that became the reason they believed I owed them more. You always land on your feet. Brandon had said it like an accusation. He had no idea how many times I had landed on my knees first. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Dad. Don't make this worse. Come back inside and fix it. I stared at that word. Fix, not discuss, not apologize, not grieve. Fix. That was what they called it when Claire absorbed the damage. I took a screenshot and saved it to the folder I had just created. Then I saved my mother's voicemails without listening to them. I knew her rhythm too well. First would come pain, then shame, then history rewritten with enough confidence to make me question my own memory if I were tired enough. But I was not 18 anymore, and I was very tired of pretending I did not understand what was happening. By the time I reached the highway, the rain had started, light at first, then steady against the windshield. Cincinnati blurred behind me in red brake lights and wet pavement. I drove north toward Columbus with Grandpa's voice sitting in the passenger seat. They'll come for what I left you. At the time, I had thought he meant it generally, the way old people sometimes say sad things about family and money. I had told him Linda would never do that so soon. I had told him Gary would be reasonable. I had told him Brandon was messy, but even he would know better than to make a claim on money clearly left to someone else. Grandpa had looked at me from that hospital bed with the sad patience of a man who loved me too much to call me naive. Claire, he had said, some people don't steal by breaking locks. They steal by making you feel guilty for having a door. I remembered laughing a little because I did not know what else to do. He did not laugh. That was the part I kept coming back to. Grandpa had not been confused. Not about the will, not about my family, not about Brandon. He had watched us for decades from his old recliner at Thanksgiving and Christmas, quiet enough that people forgot he was listening. He saw the year my parents spent my college emergency fund on Brandon's second used car because he needed transportation to get serious about work. He saw me take 2 buses to my internship that summer while Brandon quit the job after 11 days because his manager had an attitude. He saw the way my mother praised me in public and punished me in private. "Our Claire is so independent," she would say at church, smiling like she had raised me that way on purpose. Then in the car she would hiss, "You embarrassed your brother by mentioning your promotion." I used to think if I became successful enough, careful enough, useful enough, they would stop treating my stability like a family resource. Instead, it only made them more certain I could afford to lose pieces of it. The folder on that dining room table had not shocked me. That was the sickest part. It had hurt, but it had not surprised me. When I got back to my apartment in Columbus, it was almost midnight. My place was small, clean, and mine in a way nothing in my parents' house had ever felt mine. A 1-bedroom on the 2nd floor of an old brick building with a radiator that clanked in winter and kitchen cabinets I had painted myself because the landlord would not. There were no family photos in the living room except one. Grandpa Walter and me at my law office holiday party 2 years earlier. He had worn a navy suit that was too big in the shoulders and told every attorney there that I was the smartest person in the room. I had been embarrassed then. Now I would have given anything to hear it one more time. I set my purse down, took off my coat, and opened my laptop, not because I planned to fight, not yet. Because when a family starts rewriting a story, you need to preserve the first draft. I created a folder on my desktop. Whitman, Inheritance Dispute. Inside it, I made subfolders, texts, voicemails, will documents, Brandon divorce claims, Grandpa. Then I plugged in my phone and began exporting everything. My father's message, my mother's missed calls, Aunt Paula's text, which read, "I hope you can live with yourself if Brandon loses his children." That one made me stop. Not because I believed it, because I recognized the shape of it. They were already building the next version of the story. In that version, Brandon's divorce was not caused by Brandon's affair, his spending, or his talent for turning every responsibility into someone else's emergency. It would be caused by me. If Brandon lost money, it was because Claire was selfish. If Brandon lost custody, it was because Claire refused to help. If the family fractured, it was because Claire chose cash over blood. They had written the ending before I even answered. I opened a blank document and typed the date. Then I wrote down everything that had happened in my parents' dining room while it was still fresh. Who sat where, what was said, the number on the folder, the way my mother used Grandpa's name, the way my father stood near the doorway, Brandon's exact words, "You always land on your feet." I paused after typing that. Then beneath it I wrote what I had not said aloud, because no one ever caught me. The next morning I called the office of Helen Price. Helen had been Grandpa's attorney for years. She handled his estate documents, his medical power of attorney, and whatever else he had quietly arranged, while the rest of us assumed he was just watching old westerns and complaining about hospital coffee. Her receptionist recognized my name. "One moment, Miss Whitman." I stood in my kitchen with a mug of coffee cooling in my hand. Helen came on the line less than a minute later. "Claire," she said. Her voice was low, careful. "I wondered when you would call." My fingers tightened around the mug. "They asked for the money." Helen did not gasp. She did not sound surprised. She only sighed softly. "All of it?" "Pretty much. Brandon needs $72,480 for his divorce. Apparently, Grandpa would have wanted me to help." A long silence followed. Then Helen said, "Your grandfather specifically said they would use that sentence." My kitchen seemed to tilt. "What?" "He was very clear," she said. "If your family pressured you using his wishes, I was to tell you there is a recorded statement in my office." My throat closed. "The video." I put the mug down before I dropped it. "What is on it?" "I think," Helen said, "you should see it here. Not over email, not at home. Here." There was something in her tone that made my skin go cold. "This is about the inheritance?" "It is about more than the inheritance." I looked at Grandpa's picture across the room, his amused blue eyes, his hand resting proudly on my shoulder, the only person in that family who had ever made me feel like I was not hard to love, just hard to fool. "When can I come in?" I asked. Helen answered immediately. Today. And that was when I understood something I should have understood the moment my mother put that folder on the dining room table. Grandpa had not simply left me money, he had left me a record. And whatever was on that video, my family had been afraid of it long before I knew it existed. Helen Price's office was on the third floor of an old limestone building 2 blocks from the county courthouse, the kind of place with brass elevator doors, dark wood trim, and carpet that looked like it had survived every family dispute in Ohio since 1982. I arrived 20 minutes early and still felt late. The receptionist offered me coffee. I said no, then changed my mind, then took the paper cup and held it without drinking. My hands were steady. That was something people always noticed about me. They mistook it for calm. Sometimes it was. Most of the time it was practice. When you grow up in a house where the rules change depending on who is crying, you learn to keep your face still. Helen opened her office door herself. She was in her mid-50s with silver-threaded brown hair pulled into a low knot and reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. She had represented Grandpa for nearly 15 years, and in all that time I had never heard her raise her voice. She did not need to. Some people carry authority the way others carry perfume. "Claire," she said. I stood. She stepped aside. "Come in." Her office smelled like old paper, lemon polish, and rain. A gray file box sat on her desk, sealed with a white label across the top. In Grandpa's handwriting, shaky but unmistakable, were the words, "For Claire," when they asked her to pay for Brandon again. I stopped halfway to the chair. Again. One word can do a lot of damage when it confirms what you spent years trying to minimize. Helen noticed where my eyes had landed. "He was very specific about the label," she said. I sat slowly. He knew they would ask. He knew the pattern. I almost smiled at that. Pattern was a legal word. It was also a family word, whether families admitted it or not. Brandon made a mistake. My parents panicked. I was asked to understand, then to help, then to sacrifice, then to apologize for not sacrificing happily enough. That was the pattern. The first time I remembered it clearly, I was 12. Brandon was 16 and had taken my father's truck without permission. He clipped a neighbor's mailbox, dented the side panel, and lied about it until the neighbor brought over security footage from the little camera above his garage. My father shouted for an hour. My mother cried. Brandon slammed his bedroom door hard enough to shake the hallway picture frames, and somehow by dinner, I was the problem. "You don't need that summer art program," my mother told me, standing at the stove with her back turned. "It's expensive, and your brother made a mistake." I stared at her. "I already got accepted." "You're 12, Claire. You'll have other chances." Brandon apparently would not. The fee I had saved birthday money and babysitting money for went toward the mailbox and the truck repair deductible. My parents called it a family solution. I called it what it was, but only in my head. At 12, I did not have the language for theft when the people taken from you were the same people driving you to school. Grandpa did. He found me the next Saturday sitting on the back porch, pretending not to care. He lowered himself into the chair beside me with a grunt, handed me a chocolate milk from the gas station, and said, "Your brother hit the mailbox. Somehow you paid the fine." I said nothing because if I cried, I knew I would not stop. Grandpa looked out at the yard. "Don't let them teach you that being useful is the same as being loved." I did not understand then how much that sentence would cost me. At 17, Brandon totaled his first car 2 months after my parents helped him buy it. He had been drinking, though the family version later became that the road was slick and the officer was judgmental. I was saving for a legal studies camp in Chicago that my guidance counselor said would look good on college applications. My mother sat me down at the kitchen table with the same expression she wore 3 nights ago, the one that pretended the decision had already been made by decency itself. "Your brother needs transportation for work," she said. "He doesn't have a job. He will if he has a car." I remember looking at my father, waiting for him to say that was not fair. He only rubbed his face and said, "Sometimes family steps up." Family in our house always seemed to step in one direction. I did not go to Chicago. Brandon got another car. He kept it 6 months before quitting the job he finally got because his supervisor talked down to him. My parents said he was sensitive. I said he was lazy. That was the summer I became difficult. By 20, I had learned to move in silence. I applied for scholarships without telling anyone. I opened my own bank account at a credit union across town. I kept copies of everything because paperwork could not be guilted, charmed, or shouted into changing its mind. Grandpa encouraged it. He used to drive 2 hours to visit me at school with a cooler full of groceries and $20 bills hidden inside books. He never made a performance of helping. That was how I knew it was real. My parents announced every sacrifice like a press release. Grandpa just showed up. Once during my junior year, he took me to a diner off campus and watched me eat pancakes at 3 in the afternoon because I had been working double shifts and forgot lunch. "You look tired," he said. "I'm fine." That wasn't what I asked. I put down my fork. There are people who ask how you are because they want to be told they have done enough. Grandpa asked because he was willing to hear the answer. "I'm tired," I admitted. He nodded. "Then rest when you can. But don't go back just because they make surviving alone feel rude." That was Grandpa. Soft in places nobody saw. Sharp in places everyone underestimated. Helen opened the gray file box and lifted out a thick folder. "Before we watch the video," she said, "I want you to understand the context." "I'm not sure I want context." "I know," she said, "but your grandfather wanted you to have it." She slid the folder toward me. Inside were copies of checks, handwritten notes, bank withdrawal slips, and printed emails. Grandpa's handwriting appeared on yellow legal pages, sometimes strong, sometimes slanted with age. Dates, amounts, names, reasons given. Brandon car payment, $4,500. Linda said Brandon behind on mortgage, $12,000. Gary requested help for Brandon's attorney, $8,000. Linda said Claire refused to help family, noted. That last line made my throat tighten. Not because it was new, because Grandpa had written it down. He knew they were talking about me? Helen's expression softened. Yes. I looked back at the page. Linda said Claire refused to help family. A sentence like that can sound small to someone outside the room. In my family, it was a knife with a polished handle. It turned every boundary into betrayal, every no into cruelty, every step I took toward my own life into an abandonment of theirs. I flipped to another page. Brandon emergency, $6,000, no receipt provided. Linda requested cash, claimed Claire won't even visit, false. Claire visited March 12th, April 9th, May 3rd. My eyes blurred. Grandpa had kept track of my visits. I had never known that. All those afternoons in his room at Maple Creek when I brought him black licorice he was not supposed to eat, changed the batteries in his remote, organized his medications, and read him articles from the newspaper because cataracts made small print. I thought those hours were hours of art. One part of my family life nobody could turn into important. But Grandpa had been documented, not because he doubted me, because he knew they were. Helen let me read. The folder told a story I had felt my whole life but never seen arranged in rows. My parents had spent years turning Brandon into a crisis and me into a resource. Every time he failed, they found a softer word. Every time I protected myself, they found a harsher one. Brandon was struggling. I was selfish. Brandon needed grace. I needed to remember where I came from. Brandon was family. I was acting like I was better than everyone. The numbers made it colder, cleaner, harder to dismiss as hurt feelings. More than $118,000 had passed from Grandpa to my parents or Brandon over the years, nearly always under the name of rescue. Mortgage rescue, divorce rescue, car rescue, attorney rescue, child support rescue, and now they wanted my $75,000 too. Not because it would fix Brandon, because taking from someone else had become the only plan he knew how to follow. I sat back and pressed my fingers against my eyes. I thought he didn't know all of this. Helen leaned back in her chair. That is what they counted on. A memory came then, clear enough to hurt. Christmas Eve, 4 years earlier. Grandpa had still been living in his little ranch house then, before the fall that sent him first to the hospital and then to Maple Creek. The whole family had gathered in his living room. Brandon had arrived with his kids and a girlfriend who was not yet the woman he would later cheat with. Though looking back, there was always some woman slightly too close to the edge of his marriage. My mother had cornered me in the kitchen. "Your brother is short this month," she whispered. "I'm sorry to hear that." "He has children, Claire." "I know. You could help. I paid for the kids' winter coats last month." Her face tightened. That was a gift. This is different. Different. It was always different when they needed more. I said no, quietly, politely. My mother looked at me like I had spit on the floor. Grandpa appeared in the doorway a second later with an empty coffee cup in his hand, though I was almost certain it was not empty. "Linda," he said, "let the girl breathe." My mother smiled too fast. "We're just talking." "No," Grandpa said. "You're circling." At the time, I thought he had rescued me from one conversation. Now, sitting in Helen's office, I realized he had been watching the whole machine. Helen removed a smaller envelope from the box. This one was sealed. Across the front, Grandpa had written, "Claire first, then the family if they force it." My hands went cold. "What does that mean?" "It means, Helen said. "He wanted you to decide how much truth was necessary." She placed the envelope in front of me, but did not push it closer. "Your grandfather did not want revenge. He was very clear about that. But he also did not want your family using his death as a weapon against you." I stared at the envelope. For most of my life, I had believed the worst thing my family could do was take from me. I was wrong. The worst thing they did was make me feel guilty for noticing. And Grandpa, stubborn, quiet, half-blind, sitting in a nursing home chair with a legal pad on his lap, had noticed with me. Helen stood and walked to a small cabinet near the window. She unlocked it and removed a flash drive in a clear evidence sleeve. "He recorded this 6 weeks before he passed," she said. "He asked me to keep it here. He also asked that you not be pressured into watching it in a room full of people the first time." I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. "Is it bad?" Helen considered the question. "It is honest." That was worse. Bad can be denied, explained, softened. Honest just sits there. She plugged the drive into her computer, but before she pressed play, she looked at me over her glasses. "You can stop this anytime." I almost said I knew, but I did not know. I did not know if I was ready to hear Grandpa's voice again. I did not know if I was ready to find out how much he had carried alone. I did not know if watching that video would feel like comfort or losing him all over again. Then my phone buzzed on the desk. A text from Brandon. "Don't make Mom beg. Just do the right thing." I looked at those words. The right thing. In my family, the right thing had always meant the thing that cost me most and changed Brandon least. I turned the phone face down. Then I looked at Helen. "Play it." On the screen, Grandpa Walter appeared in his room at Maple Creek, sitting in the blue armchair by the window. He looked smaller than I remembered, wrapped in a gray cardigan, oxygen tubing resting beneath his nose. But his eyes were clear, very clear. He looked directly into the camera. "My name is Walter James Whitman," he said. "Today's March 23rd. I am 84 years old, and I am of sound mind." My hand went to my mouth. Grandpa paused, as if giving the room time to challenge him. Then he said the sentence that made every hair on my arms rise. "If you are watching this, Claire, then they did exactly what I thought they would do." The room around me disappeared. There was only his face, his voice, and the truth he had left behind. "They came for your money," he said, "so now I need to tell you why it was never theirs." Grandpa's voice filled Helen Price's office, thin from age but steady in a way that made the room feel smaller. "They came for your money," he said, "so now I need to tell you why it was never theirs." On the screen, he shifted slightly in the blue chair by the window. Behind him, I could see the beige curtains at Maple Creek and the corner of the bird calendar I had brought him the previous Christmas. He had complained that the birds looked too smug, then hung it up anyway. Helen sat beside me without speaking. I could hear the faint hum of her computer, the traffic outside, the blood moving in my ears. Grandpa looked directly into the camera. "Claire, I want you to understand something before anybody else gets to explain me to you. I did not leave you $75,000 because I forgot the rest of the family. I did not leave it to you because you manipulated me. I did not leave it to you because I was confused." He paused and blinked through the oxygen tank. "I left it to you because I watched this family take from you for most of your life and call it love." I pressed my fingers against my mouth. There are sentences you wait your whole life to hear and still are not ready when they arrive. "I should have stopped more of it," Grandpa said. "That is my regret. I stepped in when I saw it, but I did not see all of it. Or maybe I saw enough and hoped your mother would grow a conscience. That was my mistake. On the desk, my phone buzzed again. I did not look at it. Grandpa continued. Linda and Gary will tell you Brandon needs help. Brandon has needed help since he was old enough to blame a locked door for walking into it. Help is not the problem. The problem is that they never asked Brandon to become better. They only asked everyone else to make his mistakes cheaper. A sound came out of me before I could stop it. Not a laugh, not a sob, something between the two. Because that was Brandon exactly. Expensive mistakes, discounted by family. Grandpa reached for something off camera. His hand trembled, but when he lifted the paper, he held it up like evidence. I have made notes. Helen has copies. I have written down the money I gave, the reasons I was given, and what I later learned. Some of it may be legally clean. Some of it may not be. But morally, Claire, I know what I saw. Then the video paused. Helen had clicked the mouse. I turned to her. Why did you stop it? Because the rest names specific transactions, she said. Before you hear them, I want to be clear. You are not required to do anything with this today. I stared at the frozen image of Grandpa on the screen. What did they do? Helen's face remained professional, but her eyes softened in a way that frightened me more than any dramatic warning could have. Your grandfather believed your mother and father requested money from him under false pretenses, repeatedly. For Brandon? For Brandon. For themselves. Sometimes using you as part of the story. My stomach turned. Using me how? Helen opened another folder and slid one page across the desk. It was a photocopy of a handwritten note in Grandpa's careful script. Linda says Claire refuses to contribute to family expenses. Linda says Brandon carrying burden alone. Asked for $5,000 to help Brandon stabilize. No receipt. I read it twice, then a third time. My mother told him Brandon was carrying the burden alone? Helen nodded. I thought of the years I had quietly paid for things no one remembered, because remembering would have made their story harder to tell. Brandon's kids' winter coats, my mother's emergency dental bill, the grocery cards I mailed after my father's hours were cut, the nursing home toiletries Grandpa liked because Maple Creek soap dried out his skin. I had never been generous loudly enough for my family to count it, but they had counted my silence. Helen said there is more. But your grandfather wanted you to decide when the video should be played in full. I looked at the frozen screen. And if they challenge the will? Then it becomes relevant. If they just keep pressuring me privately, then you still have the right to protect yourself. Protect myself. It sounded so simple when someone outside the family said it. I left Helen's office with copies of the will, copies of Grandpa's notes, and the knowledge that my family had not simply asked me for money. They had spent years building a version of me that made taking from me feel pathetic. By the time I reached the parking lot, my phone had 18 unread messages. My mother, you are breaking this family. My father, call me now. I hope you're proud of yourself. Your mother can't stop crying. Then, from a cousin I had not spoken to in 6 months, heard what happened. Honestly, Claire, this is low even for you. I stood beside my car in the cold afternoon wind and read that one for a long moment. Heard what happened. Not asked. Heard. The campaign had started. I saved every message. That night, I did not sleep much. I sat at my kitchen table with Grandpa's files spread in front of me and built a timeline. Not because Helen had asked me to. Because it was the only thing that kept my hands from shaking. Dates down the left. What my family claimed on one side. What the records showed on the other. April 14th, Linda told Grandpa Brandon needed money for mortgage. April 16th, Grandpa wrote check for $12,000. April 20, Brandon posted photos from a golf resort in Kentucky. June 3, Linda told Grandpa Claire refused to visit. June 5, my calendar showed I had taken Grandpa to his eye appointment. August 11, Gary requested cash for family legal issue. August 13, Brandon charged $1,800 at a jewelry store. None of it was courtroom ready yet. Not all of it proved misuse. But patterns do not need to be finished before they become visible. And this pattern had teeth. On Thursday evening, my mother called from an unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, then answered because I wanted to hear what version of herself she had chosen. Claire, she said softly. Too softly. We need to stop this before it becomes something we can't take back. What is this? This coldness, this punishment. Your grandfather would be devastated to see us divided. I looked at the open file on my table. He seemed prepared. Silence. Then her voice sharpened. What does that mean? It means I spoke to Helen. Another silence, longer this time. When my mother spoke again, the softness was gone. You had no right to go digging through your grandfather's private affairs. He was my grandfather. He was my father, and he was the one who wrote the will. My mother laughed once, bitterly. Don't hide behind paperwork, Claire. You always do that. You find some document, some technicality, and you use it so you don't have to act like a human being. There it was again. The Family Translation Dictionary. Records meant cold. Boundaries meant cruel. Questions meant betrayal. Mom, I said, why are you afraid of the paperwork? She hung up. The next day, Aunt Paula texted me an invitation to Sunday dinner at my parents' house. She phrased it carefully. Just a calm family conversation. No pressure. Everyone loves you. That was how I knew it was a setup. Still, I went. Not because I thought they would be reasonable, because people reveal more when they think they have the room arranged in their favor. My parents' house smelled like pot roast and lemon furniture spray when I walked in. My mother had cooked the way she did when she wanted moral authority. Food on the table, candles lit, cloth napkins, the performance of warmth. But there were too many cars in the driveway. In the dining room sat my parents, Brandon, Aunt Paula, Uncle Martin, 2 cousins, and Pastor Dean from my parents' church. Brandon's eyes were red again, though this time I noticed there were no tears on his cheeks. I stopped at the doorway. My mother smiled like a woman greeting a difficult patient. We thought it might help to have people here who care about this family. No, I said. You thought witnesses would make me easier to shame. Pastor Dean cleared his throat. Claire, I think everyone just wants healing. I looked at him. Did they tell you what this meeting is about? His expression flickered. That answered my question. I sat down anyway, keeping my purse on my lap. My father began. Your mother and I are asking you one more time to think about what you're doing. I have. Brandon leaned forward. My kids could lose their home. Your kids live with Megan, I said. His face tightened. My mother snapped. That is not the point. It is exactly the point. You're asking me to pay for a divorce you're not being honest about. Brandon's hands curled on the table. You don't know anything about my marriage. No, I know you're asking for $75,000 without showing me a single honest breakdown of where it would go. Aunt Paula sighed dramatically. This is what I mean. She talks like a lawyer instead of a sister. No, I said. I talk like someone who has learned that vague emergencies are expensive. My father's palm hit the table hard enough to rattle the silverware. Enough. Everyone went quiet. He pointed at me, and for a moment I was 16 again, sitting at that same table being told Brandon's mistake was my lesson. You left this family years ago, he said. You don't get to come back now and judge how we take care of each other. I felt the old fear rise. Then I felt it stop. Because fear needs uncertainty to grow, and for once I was certain. I didn't leave the family, I said. I stopped financing Brandon's consequences. Brandon stood so quickly his chair scraped the floor. You selfish little... Sit down, my mother hissed, but Brandon was already breathing hard, the wounded act slipping. You think Grandpa's little video is going to make you untouchable? The room went still. My mother's face changed first, then my father's. Aunt Paula looked down at her plate. There it was, the thing they were not supposed to know about. I looked at Brandon. I never mentioned a video. His mouth opened, then closed. For the first time all night, nobody had a script. I stood slowly. Thank you, I said. My mother blinked. For what? For proving you're all afraid of what Grandpa had to say. Then I walked out of the dining room while my phone was already recording the time, the date, and the exact moment my family's story began to crack. I did not drive home after leaving my parents' house. I drove 3 blocks, pulled into the parking lot of a closed pharmacy, and sat under a flickering streetlight with both hands in my lap until the shaking stopped. It was not fear. Not exactly. It was the feeling you get when a door you have leaned against your whole life suddenly gives way, and behind it is not a wall, but a room full of things you were never supposed to see. Brandon knew about the video. My mother knew. My father knew. Aunt Paula knew enough to stare down at her plate like the mashed potatoes had become legally dangerous. That meant Grandpa had not imagined the pressure. He had not been paranoid. He had not been an old man misreading family tension from a nursing home chair. They had known he left something behind, and still they walked me into that dining room like I was the one with something to hide. I opened the notes app on my phone and typed everything while the details were still sharp. Sunday dinner. Present: Linda, Gary, Brandon, Paula, Martin, 2 cousins, Pastor Dean. Purpose disguised as healing. Brandon referenced Grandpa's little video without me mentioning it first. Linda visibly reacted. Gary reacted. Paula looked down. I added one more line. They are afraid of the video, but not enough to stop. That was important. People who are afraid and stop are guilty in the ordinary way. People who are afraid and keep going are either desperate or convinced the room still belongs to them. My family had always believed the room belonged to them. The next morning I called Helen Price before I even made coffee. He mentioned the video, I said when she answered. Helen did not ask who. Brandon? Yes. A pause. In what context? I read her the notes. Not emotionally, not dramatically. Just the facts. When I finished, Helen let out a slow breath. Well, she said, that makes things clearer. Does it? It tells us they know Mr. Whitman created something they do not control. I stood at my kitchen counter, staring at the radiator clicking under the window. What I don't understand is why they're still pushing. Helen's voice became quieter. Because control is a habit, and because for a long time it worked. That was the kind of sentence that did not feel profound until it hit the bruise. She asked me to come in again that afternoon and bring every message, voicemail, and note I had saved. I did. By then, there were more. My mother had sent a long text at 6:14 a.m. I barely slept. I hope that makes you happy. Your brother is sick over this. Your father is beside himself. Grandpa never wanted us fighting. You are turning grief into greed. My father sent one at 7:02. This family has done plenty for you. Don't make us take steps we don't want to take. Brandon sent nothing until 10:39. You think you're untouchable because some old man made a video? Be careful, Claire. Courts don't like people who manipulate the elderly. I saved them all. By 3 o'clock, I was sitting across from Helen again while she reviewed the screenshots on my laptop. She said very little as she read. That was one thing I liked about her. She did not gasp for my benefit. She did not call my family monsters. She did not offer me a tissue every time the truth became ugly. She treated the facts like they deserved a clean table. When she reached Brandon's text, she stopped. Read this out loud, she said. So I did. You think you're untouchable because some old man made a video? Be careful, Claire. Courts don't like people who manipulate the elderly. Helen leaned back. There it is. What? The shape of their threat. They are not just asking you for money anymore. They are laying groundwork to challenge testamentary capacity or allege undue influence. I knew those words from work. I had heard attorneys use them in probate cases when families went to war over houses, accounts, antique watches, china cabinets nobody had cared about until someone else got them. Testamentary capacity meant whether Grandpa was mentally capable of making the will. Undue influence meant whether someone had pressured him into it. In simpler family language, they were preparing to say Grandpa was too weak to know what he wanted, and I was greedy enough to take advantage. The old familiar heat rose behind my ribs, not because they wanted money. I understood wanting money, because they were willing to make Grandpa smaller to get it. They were willing to take the clearest man I had ever known and smear fog over his final choices because those choices did not benefit Brandon. Helen must have seen my face. Claire, she said, anger is understandable, but records will be more useful. I laughed once, sharp and humorless. Grandpa said almost the same thing. He said many useful things. Then she opened the gray file box again. This time she removed not only Grandpa's notes, but copies of medical evaluations, nursing home records, attorney meeting notes, and signed statements from 2 witnesses who had been present when the will was updated. I stared at the stack. He prepared for a capacity challenge. He insisted on it, Helen said. Your grandfather requested that his physician provide a contemporaneous statement regarding his cognitive condition. He also requested that I document our meetings thoroughly. I ran my fingers along the top page. The paper felt ordinary. That was the strange thing about documents. They could change the shape of a life and still feel like copy paper. The physician's note was short, clinical, and devastating to my family's argument. Mr. Walter J. Whitman is alert and oriented to person, place, time, and situation. He demonstrates clear understanding of his assets, family relationships, and testamentary intentions. I read the line twice. Clear understanding of his assets, family relationships, and testamentary intentions. Grandpa had known what he owned. He had known who we were. He had known exactly what he was doing. Helen slid another page toward me. These are my notes from the day he signed the revised will. I read her neat typed summary. Mr. Whitman stated that he wished to make a specific cash bequest of $75,000 to Claire Ann Whitman. He stated that Miss Whitman had not requested this bequest and was unaware of the amount. He further stated he did not wish the funds redirected to Brandon Whitman, Linda Whitman, Gary Whitman, or any other family member. I swallowed hard. Grandpa had named them, not vaguely, not emotionally, specifically. He knew they would say I asked him for it. Yes, Helen said. So he made sure the record said you did not. Something inside me cracked then, quietly. Not the way people think breaking sounds. There was no sobbing, no collapse, just a soft internal surrender to the fact that one person had cared enough to protect me in advance. I looked down because I did not want Helen to see my eyes fill. She pretended not to notice. There is more, she said after a moment. Of course there was. She pulled out a spreadsheet. It was Grandpa's, though clearly cleaned up by Helen's office. Dates, check numbers, amounts, recipients, and stated purposes. More than $118,000. I had seen the total before, but now the columns made it impossible to soften. Twelderwith and Whitman, Brandon mortgage emergency. $8,000. Gary Whitman, legal retainer for Brandon. $5,500. Brandon Whitman, child-related expenses. $9,000. Linda Whitman, Walter medical balance. Helen tapped that last one. This is one of the items your grandfather questioned most. Medical balance. She opened another folder. Maple Creek provided payment records. That amount was never applied to his account. My skin went cold. What happened to it? We do not know yet. Yet. The word sat between us like a locked drawer. Helen. She looked at me. Did they steal from him? She did not answer right away, which was an answer of its own. Your grandfather believed some funds were obtained under false pretenses, she said carefully. Whether that rises to something legally actionable would require more investigation. I looked at the spreadsheet again. For years, my mother had called me selfish. For years, my father had told me family did not keep score. For years, Brandon had treated every dollar within reach like it had been waiting for him. And Grandpa, sitting quietly in Maple Creek, had been keeping score because someone had to. He didn't tell me, I said. No. Why? Helen's expression softened again. Because he did not want the last part of his life to become your burden while he was still living it. That hurt more than the money. I could handle betrayal. I had practice. But love that protected me quietly, imperfectly, too late, and still with everything it had, made me feel 8 years old. Helen gave me a few minutes. Then she turned her computer monitor toward me. I think you should watch another portion. I nodded. She played the video from where we had stopped. Grandpa appeared again, small and sharp-eyed in the blue chair. If Linda tells you I was confused, he said, ask her why I was clear enough when she needed a check. I stopped breathing. If Gary tells you family does not keep score, ask him why the score only disappears after Brandon is ahead. If Brandon tells you he needs saving, ask him what he has done with all the saving he already received. A tear slipped down my cheek. I let it. Grandpa leaned slightly closer to the camera. Claire, listen to me. I am not giving you permission to hate them. Hate keeps people in the room too long. I am giving you permission to leave the room with what is yours. Helen paused the video again. I stared at Grandpa's frozen face. There it was. The thing no one in my family had ever given me. Permission. Not to win. Not to punish. To stop paying. That evening, Helen drafted a formal letter to my family's attorney, though officially they did not have one yet. She worded it in the careful language lawyers use when they are placing a locked gate in front of a person who keeps wandering toward trouble. The bequest to Claire Ann Whitman was valid, intentional, and supported by contemporaneous documentation. Any allegation of incapacity or undue influence would be met with relevant records, witness statements, medical documentation, and Mr. Whitman's recorded statement. She sent it to my parents by certified mail and email. By 9 that night, my mother called. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice came through 10 seconds later, thin and furious. "You had no right to bring lawyers into this. No right. This was a family matter, Claire. A family matter. If you play that video, you will destroy what little is left of us." I saved the voicemail. Then I opened Grandpa's spreadsheet and added a new line to my own timeline. Linda threatened consequences if video is played. I sat there for a long time after that, in my quiet apartment, with the radiator knocking and the city lights smeared across the window. For the first time, I was not wondering whether I could survive losing my family. I was wondering how much of my life I had spent calling captivity by the wrong name. The certified letter arrived at my parents' house on a Friday morning. I knew because my mother called me at 9:17, 9:19, 9:22, and 9:26. 4 calls in 9 minutes. I let everyone go to voicemail. By then, I had learned something important about panic. You do not have to answer it just because it knows your name. The first voicemail was my mother crying. The second was my mother angry. The third was my father telling me I had crossed a line. The fourth was Brandon. He did not cry. He did not plead. He whispered, "You think you're smart, Claire. You always did. But if you drag Grandpa's name through court, I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of granddaughter you really were." I played that one twice, not because it hurt, because threats are clearer the second time. Then I saved it under the folder labeled Brandon Direct Threats. At noon, Helen called. I assumed they received the letter. I looked at the missed calls lighting up my screen like warning flares. You could say that. Did anyone put anything in writing? Brandon left a voicemail. Send it. I did. 20 minutes later, Helen called back. He's rattled. He sounds confident. No, she said. Confident people make demands. Frightened people threaten stories. That sentence stayed with me, because my family had always been good at stories. The story of Brandon, the struggling father, the story of Linda, the devoted mother. The story of Gary, the tired man holding everyone together. And then me. Claire, the cold daughter. Claire, the selfish sister. Claire, the woman who had done well enough to owe everyone else the difference. By Sunday, the story had reached people I had not spoken to in years. A high school friend of Brandon's messaged me on Facebook. "Can't believe you do that to your brother after everything your family did for you." A cousin sent a longer message saying she hoped money kept me warm at night. Pastor Dean left a voicemail about forgiveness, though he carefully avoided mentioning the amount I was being asked to forgive into Brandon's bank account. I did not respond. I built the record. Screenshots, dates, names, context. That was the strange thing about being called cold. They were not entirely wrong. I had grown a cold place inside myself because it was the only part of me my family had never figured out how to reach. It was where I put facts before anyone could contaminate them with tears. On Monday morning, while I was at work reviewing discovery responses for a landlord-tenant case, an email appeared in my personal inbox. The sender's name made me sit up. Megan Whitman, Brandon's wife, or soon-to-be ex-wife, depending on which court filing you were looking at. The subject line was simple: "You should know the truth." I stared at it for almost a full minute before opening it. "Claire, I know I am probably the last person you want to hear from, and I'm sure your family has said plenty about me. I'm not writing to ask you for anything. I'm writing because Brandon told me he was getting money from you, and I think you deserve to know what you would actually be paying for." Attached were 5 documents: a divorce filing, a custody affidavit, credit card statements, screenshots of text messages, and a photo that made the air leave my lungs. Brandon in a hotel lobby with a woman I recognized vaguely from one of his old office Christmas parties. His hand was on her lower back. He was wearing the blue watch Megan had bought him for their 10th anniversary. The date stamp was 6 months before Megan filed for divorce. Not shocking. Still ugly. I called Megan on my lunch break from my car. She answered on the second ring. "Claire?" "Yes." She sighed. "I'm sorry." That caught me off guard. For what? For whatever they told you. I looked out through the windshield at the gray office parking lot. "They said you're trying to take everything." Megan gave a tired laugh. Of course they did. Her voice sounded nothing like the villain my family had described. She sounded exhausted, careful, like someone who had spent too long explaining obvious pain to people committed to misunderstanding it. She told me Brandon had not lost custody because he lacked an attorney. There had been a temporary parenting order, yes, but the court had limited his time because he missed exchanges, drank before pickup twice, and once left the kids with his girlfriend while he ran errands for 5 hours. He told your parents I was poisoning the kids against him, Megan said. The truth is, they started asking why Dad's friends slept over when Mom wasn't there. I closed my eyes. There are betrayals that surprise you, and then there are betrayals that only confirm the exact shape of a person. What about the legal fees? I asked. He owes his attorney money, she said. But not $75,000. Not even close. Most of what he's trying to cover is credit card debt, the personal loan he took out after I froze our joint account, and money he borrowed from your parents. Borrowed? That's what he calls it. Then she sent me one more screenshot while we were on the phone. It was a text from Brandon to Megan dated 2 weeks earlier. Claire got Grandpa's money. Mom thinks she can break her down. Once that happens, I'll be fine. I read it once. Then again, there it was in his own words. Not grief, not desperation, not even shame. Strategy. Mom thinks she can break her down. I thanked Megan. She was quiet for a moment. Claire? Yes? Don't give him the money. I wasn't planning to. No, she said softly. I mean, don't give any of them away to make you feel like you owe it. I looked at the screenshot until the words blurred. That part's harder. I know, Megan said. That's why I'm telling you. He doesn't need rescuing. He needs consequences. When we hung up, I sat in my car for 10 minutes without moving. My family had not been asking me to save Brandon's children. They had been asking me to fund the fallout of his affair. They had wrapped hotel charges, legal bills, and bad debt in the language of family and placed it on the dining room table beside my grandfather's death. That afternoon, I forwarded everything to Helen. Her reply came quickly. This is useful. Very. By Wednesday, my parents had hired an attorney. His name was Evan Rusk, and the letter he sent Helen was written in the polished, bloodless language of someone trying to sound reasonable while carrying a threat in both hands. It stated that Linda and Gary Whitman had serious concerns regarding Walter Whitman's capacity at the time of the revised will. It suggested that Claire Ann Whitman may have exerted inappropriate emotional influence over an elderly relative. It proposed a family settlement to avoid unnecessary pain, expense, and reputational harm. The family settlement was simple. I would transfer the full $75,000 into an escrow account for Brandon's legal and family needs. In exchange, they would not challenge the will. I read that part 3 times. They were trying to sell me peace with money they had no right to touch. Helen called it what it was: extortion wearing a tie. A meeting was scheduled at Helen's office the following Friday. I did not want to attend. Helen said I did not have to. Then she added that sometimes letting people speak in a controlled room is useful. So I went. My mother arrived in black, as if still in mourning, though I had seen her wear brighter lipstick at Grandpa's funeral. My father wore his gray church suit. Brandon came in without a tie, jaw tight, eyes scanning the room as if looking for the weakest exit. Their attorney, Evan Rusk, carried a leather portfolio and the calm confidence of a man who had not yet seen Grandpa's file. Helen seated everyone in the conference room. A long table, a pitcher of water, a blank screen mounted on the wall. A flash drive sat beside Helen's laptop in its clear sleeve. My mother saw it immediately. Her face lost color. Evan began with a speech about family harmony. Helen let him finish. Then she said, "Are your clients formally contesting Mr. Brett Whitman's will?" Evan smiled politely. "We are hoping to avoid that. That was not my question." My father shifted in his chair. Evan's smile thinned. "If necessary, yes. We are prepared to raise concerns about capacity and influence." Helen nodded once. "Then Mr. Whitman's recorded statement becomes relevant." My mother leaned forward. "There is no need for that." Her voice was too quick, too sharp. Brandon looked at me across the table. "Claire," he said, suddenly softer. "Come on, you're my sister." I watched him try to put on the old face, the helpless one, the wounded one, The one that had worked on my parents so many times it had become muscle memory. "You were my brother when you texted Megan that Mom could break me down," I said. His expression changed. My mother turned to him. "What is she talking about?" For the first time, Brandon looked truly afraid. Not because he had hurt me, because he had been documented doing it. Helen slid a printed copy of the screenshot across the table. Evan read it. His face did not change much, but his fingers stopped moving. My father picked it up next. Then my mother. "Mom thinks she can break her down. Once that happens, I'll be fine." My mother stared at the page like the words had betrayed her by existing. "Brandon," she whispered. He threw up his hands. I was venting. "No," I said. "You were planning." My father slammed the paper onto the table. "This is not helping." "No," Helen said calmly. "It is clarifying." Evan cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should take a brief recess." Helen looked at me. Not Evan, not my parents. Me. For a second, the whole room narrowed to that choice. Grandpa's voice came back to me. "Let the video play." I looked at my mother, still clutching the screenshot. My father, furious that the room was no longer obeying him. Brandon, finally out of tears and out of timing. And I realized I was done protecting them from the truth they had created. "No," I said. Everyone looked at me. I turned to Helen. "Play it." Helen did not ask me if I was sure. That was why I trusted her. She only nodded once, turned her laptop toward the conference room screen, and clicked play. For a few seconds, there was only the blank blue glow of the monitor reflecting across the long, polished table. My mother sat perfectly still, both hands clasped around the printed screenshot like she could make the words disappear by holding them tightly enough. My father stared at the screen with the hard, offended expression he wore whenever a room stopped obeying him. Brandon leaned back in his chair, jaw tight, but one knee bounced under the table. Evan Rusk, their attorney, looked at Helen. "I want to note that my clients have not agreed." Helen cut him off calmly. "Your clients raised concerns regarding Mr. Whitman's intent and capacity. This recording was created by Mr. Whitman for that exact purpose. You may object in the proper forum later. For now, you asked for clarity. Here it is." Then Grandpa appeared. Walter James Whitman sat in his blue armchair at Maple Creek, a gray cardigan buttoned crookedly over his shirt, oxygen tubing beneath his nose, a folded blanket over his knees. He looked smaller than I remembered, and for one terrible second I wanted Helen to stop it. Not because of my family, because hearing his voice again felt like touching a bruise with both hands. But his eyes were clear, so clear that no one in the room could pretend not to see it. "My name is Walter James Whitman," he said. "Today is March 23rd. I am 84 years old, and I am of sound mind." My mother closed her eyes. Grandpa continued. "I am recording this statement because I believe my daughter Linda, my son-in-law Gary, and my grandson Brandon may attempt to challenge or redirect the inheritance I have chosen to leave to my granddaughter, Claire Ann Whitman." The room changed. Not loudly. No one shouted. No one stood. But the air tightened as if every person at that table had leaned closer to the same flame. Grandpa looked down at a paper in his lap, then back up. "I want it understood that Claire did not ask me for money. She did not pressure me. She did not suggest this amount. In fact, as of this recording, she does not know the amount I have chosen to leave her." Helen paused the video just long enough to slide a document across the table. "Physician statement," she said. "Same week. Alert and oriented, full understanding of assets, relationships, and testamentary intentions." Evan took the paper. He read it. Then he stopped looking quite so comfortable. Helen pressed play again. "I have watched my family call Claire selfish for years," Grandpa said. "What they meant was that she stopped making Brandon's mistakes easier to survive." Brandon made a small sound under his breath. My mother whispered, "Dad, please." But Grandpa was not in the room to be softened. He had recorded himself in the one place they could not interrupt him. "I helped Brandon many times," Grandpa said. "More times than I should have. I helped because I love him, and because I believed family should help when a person is trying to stand. But a person cannot stand if everyone keeps paying him to stay on the floor." My father shifted. Grandpa lifted a sheet of paper. "Helen has my records. Dates, amounts, and reasons given to me. $12,000 requested by Linda for Brandon's mortgage emergency." 8,000 requested by Gary for a legal retainer, 5,500 requested by Brandon for child-related expenses, 9,000 requested by Linda for a medical balance she said I owed. My mother's face went pale. Grandpa's voice sharpened. That medical balance did not exist. For the first time, my father looked at my mother instead of the screen. Linda, he said quietly. She shook her head without looking at him. No, but Grandpa kept going. I asked Maple Creek for my account records. The $9,000 was never paid to them because it was never owed to them. When I asked Linda about it, she told me I was confused. I was not confused. I was disappointed. There it was, not rage, not accusation, disappointment. Somehow that was worse. My mother began to cry, but not the way she had cried at the funeral. Those tears had been public, careful, arranged around tissues and sympathy. These were small, angry tears, the kind that came when the story inside her head could no longer survive the evidence outside it. I did everything for him, she said. Helen did not pause the video. Grandpa seemed to look directly at her. If Linda says she did everything for me, ask her why Claire was the one who brought my medicine organizer, my reading glasses, my winter socks, and the lemon drops the nurses pretended not to see. Ask her why Claire visited when there was no checkbook on the table. My throat closed. I stared at the screen because if I looked at my mother, I might finally say something loud enough to become the story instead of the truth. Grandpa breathed slowly, then continued. I do not say these things because I want to punish anyone. I say them because silence has been used in this family like a broom. Every ugly thing swept under the word family, every unfair thing called sacrifice, every demand dressed up as love. Brandon stood. I'm not listening to this. Evan grabbed his sleeve. Sit down. Brandon yanked free. He was old. The screen kept playing. Grandpa said, if Brandon says I was too old to understand my own will, remind him that in April, when he asked me for $10,000, he told me I was the only person in this family who still had a sharp mind. Brandon froze. Helen reached into her file and placed a copy of a check on the table. $10,000. April. Endorsed by Brandon Whitman. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of math. My father picked up the copy, looked at the back, then looked at his son. Brandon? Brandon's face twisted. I needed it. For what? I asked. He turned on me. Don't start acting like you care. I care where Grandpa's money went. It wasn't your money then. And my inheritance isn't yours now. The words landed cleanly. No one had anything ready for them. On the video, Grandpa leaned closer to the camera. His voice softened. Claire, if this is being played in a room with them, then I am sorry. I hope they would let you have what I left you without making you defend your right to it. But if they did not, I want you to hear me clearly. I stopped breathing. The $75,000 is yours. Not because you earned my love. You never had to earn them. Not because you're better than them, but because you have spent too long paying for peace that never lasted. My eyes filled. This time I did not wipe them away. He continued, do not give Brandon your future because he has spent his. Do not give Linda your guilt because she has confused control with motherhood. Do not give Gary your silence because he has confused authority with truth. My father's chair scraped backward. That's enough. Helen's voice was calm. Mr. Whitman, sit down. He stared at her, stunned. For 61 years, my father had moved through family rooms like his discomfort was a court order. But this was not his kitchen. This was not his table, and Helen Price did not flinch. He sat. Grandpa's final words filled the room. Claire, do not confuse being alone at the table with being wrong. Sometimes the only honest person in a family looks selfish to everyone still benefiting from the lie. Take what I left you, build something quiet with it, and let the people who call you cruel explain why they felt entitled to money that was never theirs. The video ended. No music, no fade. Just Grandpa's face disappearing into a black screen. For a while, no one moved. Then my mother broke. Not softly, not with dignity. She pushed the screenshot away and said, do you know what it was like? Always being the one he judged? Always watching him praise you while I was the daughter who had to handle everything? There it was. The root under the rot. Not Brandon. Not the divorce. Not even the money. Jealousy. Old, sour, and dressed for years as concern. You handled everything? I asked. My voice was very quiet. She looked at me with wet, furious eyes. You don't know what it is to be responsible for a family. No, I said. I know what it is to be made responsible for one. Brandon scoffed. This is ridiculous. So what, Grandpa made a sad little video and now Claire gets to act like a saint? Evan finally spoke. Brandon, stop talking. That, more than anything, told me the meeting was over. Their lawyer had seen the medical note, the witness statements, the checks, the screenshot, the video. He was no longer looking at a quick pressure campaign. He was looking at clients who had walked into a room carrying gasoline and demanded a match. Helen folded her hands. My client will not transfer any portion of her bequest. If your clients intend to challenge the will, we are prepared to respond with the full record. Evan closed his portfolio. I'll need to confer privately with my clients. He did not sound like a man eager to file anything. My mother turned to me one last time. If you walk away with that money, you walk away from us. I looked at her. The old Claire would have heard that as a threat. The new one heard instructions. I know, I said, and for once I did not explain. 3 weeks later, Evan formally notified Helen that my parents and Brandon would not contest the will. The language was careful. No admission, no apology, just a quiet retreat wrapped in legal phrasing. The $75,000 transferred to my account the following month. I did not buy anything dramatic. No new car, no victory trip, no grand gesture for people to point at and call me greedy. I paid off my student loans. I put money toward a small condo in Columbus with morning light in the kitchen and a front door only I had keys to. And I framed one thing. Not the check, not the will. A copy of the last line Grandpa had written to me in the envelope Helen gave me after the meeting. Don't let them turn your future into someone else's emergency fund. My family still tells a version of the story where I chose money over blood. I let them. People who need a lie that badly should have to maintain it themselves. As for Brandon, his divorce went forward without my inheritance. He did not lose his children because of me. He lost trust because of what he had done. My parents helped him in smaller, angrier ways, and for all I know, they still call it love. I call it what Grandpa taught me to call it. A pattern, and patterns only change when someone finally refuses to keep completing them. So that is my story. My family demanded my $75,000 inheritance for my brother's divorce. They called it loyalty. They called it sacrifice. They called it what Grandpa would have wanted. Then Grandpa's video played, and the dead man in the blue chair told the truth more clearly than anyone living at that table had managed in years.